Hi everyone, it's Kate here and welcome to the first video of this year's tutorials. And I'm so glad that you all stayed with me through the last year, and there's so many of you now. I am so very happy about that. And before we start, I just wanted to say that I have a huge thing coming up. So I will talk about it at the end of the tutorial, but basically I'm migrating from Patreon to a new website and I'm actually opening my own online school. But I will talk about that after we're done with this. So if you want to find out, then watch the end of the video after. So today we're going to be doing a very interesting thing. I am sorry for my finger. I cut it badly when I was cutting salad yesterday, but as usual. But anyway, nonetheless, we're going to be recording the video, and I have prepared the selection of pastels already and a color wheel. Why do we need a color wheel? Well, a color wheel we will be using to see the complementary colors. So we'll talk about that now when we move on to drawing. Then I have a selection of pastels. We will go through those in a bit. A paintbrush, some water, Clairefontaine pastel matte paper, and as usual, some wipes just to clean your hands. So let's start talking about complementary colors. For the reference photo that I've chose, I see that the colors that are predominantly there are yellow greens. So it means those are greens that are closer to yellow on the color wheel. So these are our yellow greens, and to find the opposite color that would accentuate, that would bring out our greens, we find that it's a red violet. So this is just an ordinary Itten's color wheel. You can find it even online. You don't have to buy one of these, or you can make it yourselves. But it's very useful to actually see those color combinations. So opposite colors, what does it mean? It means that when you use a color, the color that is directly opposite it on the color wheel, when you place those two together, they will intensify each other. So for this little tutorial that I want to do today, I want to use this feat of these opposite colors to actually intensify the yellow greens. So I have chosen here red violets, and I didn't have a red violet that would be dark enough, so I chose just an ordinary violet. This is closer to the blue, but still I have the light color, slightly darker color, and the dark color. So these colors we will be using for shadows. Then for light areas we will be using yellows, as I want my light areas to be really warm, so a really warm green. And as these colors will be shining through, we will be using those for underpainting. This is why we need the water. And as these colors will be shining through, they will actually kind of intensify the greens, but you will see that now that we go through with the tutorial. Then what I need is some browns for the tree trunks and some grass greens for then developing the greens on top of my underpainting. Another thing that you have to remember is that you have to have a wide selection of greens. So I have different colors of greens here, but I think that I will be possibly using more than these. So depending on your collection, don't worry if you do not have the exact same colors that I'm using. The purpose of this tutorial is to teach you to use the set that you have in a similar way. So if you don't have the exact same colors of any of these, go ahead and choose your own. So for example, if you don't have the red violets, go with the violets or try with the blues. It's not going to intensify the green as much, but still you can go ahead with this tutorial. So don't worry if you don't have all those colors. And for the greens, choose the ones that seem the most beautiful to you. So we're not going to be doing a photorealistic work. So if you are looking for photorealism, I know some other great painters in pastels that do that. Check out Emma Colbert, but she does mostly animals, and Jason Morgan. They both do animals, but they do photorealistic work. But in this one, I want to teach you how to actually have a more painterly approach to the drawing. By the way, this technique, I learned it from Maggie Price. She has a wonderful book on pastels and also some courses. So this is how she uses her pastels with an underpainting. And the first thing that we will do, I forgot to mention that we will need also a charcoal, vine charcoal or charcoal pencil, but not necessary if you don't have one. You can still use a pastel stick to sketch out your drawing. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to map in where our trees are going to be located and where we want our patches of light and dark. So I'm going to take my charcoal. This is just a simple vine charcoal stick. You can buy these in any art supply store, or you can use a charcoal pencil as well. And now I'm looking at my reference image and I see that my horizon line is slightly above the center. So a good tip, never place your horizon line in the middle. It's going to kind of take away from the impact of your work, but compositionally it's not going to work as well as if you were to place it lower or above the center line. So I'm gonna put it slightly above. And as this is pastel matte, when I'm using charcoal, when I will be washing the pastels out with my with water, the charcoal is going to disappear. So don't worry that it's not going to leave the black marks on it. So here I am looking at where I want my trees to be. So there's one tree here. Again, speaking of composition, if you divide your image approximately into thirds, the best way to place your object is in these, let's divide it into thirds, is in these points. So that is going to make your composition more interesting. So here I will place this other tree. We don't have to do it the same way as we see it on the reference image. You can move the trees wherever you like, but I really like the composition of this shot, so I think we're gonna stick with it. And you can see that this tree, I placed it precisely on these points. And here I'm just gonna map in where those bushes are. And there's this beautiful path. I actually took this photo last year. Those of you who follow me for some time now on my Patreon have probably seen it, or you can go backwards and see all the photos that came with this one. But anyway, I will be adding it to the post as well. And there's a bench. I really don't like this bench. I want to show this kind of a forest mood. So this is actually a national park thing, and there are benches all over, but I don't want to add that bench here. So I'm just looking at those big shapes. Dark light. And now that I have my main map in, here I see that there's also this tree creating a beautiful triangle that is slightly darker. So now we can start adding the color. What I do first is I'm going to choose my yellows, and I'm going to take my mid-tone value and add the mid-tone value yellow everywhere where I see there's light. So I see that here there's a light area. One more thing, when you're using water, remember that if you're using Jackson's soft pastels, they do not wash out with water. So I had to find it the hard way. But if you're using those, you can use odorless mineral spirits or other things like blenders that you use for colored pencils, for example, or alcohol. That also works, but water doesn't work with Jackson's. So I'm going to add those lights where I see them. On this path here, I see that there's this area here, quite light. Also, this tree has some branches here that are light. Here, I'm just working with the big patches that I see in my reference. Okay, next I'm gonna add darker yellow and add those where I see the still light hitting the trees, for example, here in the background, but at the same time it's not as bright as the places which are very highlighted by the sunlight. So let's add a bit here. So in general, rule of thumb, use mid-tone value first for mostly all the light areas that belong to the light, which are highlighted by the sun. And then with the two other values, you add those brightest areas where you see them and the darker areas in the sunlight. So here you see some brighter patches, and also here this area is quite bright. Okay, next we're moving to the shadows. So with the shadows, I take my darkest color here first because I see that those trunks of the trees are really dark. So here I can immediately map in the trunk of this tree and this tree as well. So those are the darkest areas. Here there's another trunk there in the background. Those are the darkest areas that I have, and also there are some shadows in these bushes that are quite dark as well. And then I'm immediately moving to my next value. I'm moving to this mid-tone value, and I'm adding everywhere where I see that there's the shadow, that it doesn't touch the light. I'm adding this value. Excuse me. So here I see these bushes. Here they are sunlit, and here they are in the shadow. So this is basically what I'm doing. I'm adding this value everywhere that I see the shadow. And this way we have separated our lights from darks. So this is kind of a guide map, and also this lightest value I'm going to be using in those areas which are the lightest areas in my shadow. There are some lighter bits here on these bushes, so something here, and there's this foliage over here. Plus we have some of this light, just a bit lighter leaves on this part here, on these bushes. And then let's add also some, just to create a bit more variation in that shadow area on the path. So now, don't get scared, this looks a bit chaotic, but you can still make out the trunks and the path kind of going around, but at the same time we see lights and darks. Now it's time to take a paintbrush. An advice here, use an old paintbrush, the one that you're not using for painting, because abrasive surfaces, they will be destroying your brushes. So I'm taking water and I'm starting with the lightest areas first, so with the yellows, and I'm trying not to go into those violets. So I'm going to wash out my pastel. And only in those yellow areas. This way, we're creating this underpainting that's not going to move once we start applying the pastels on top of it. So I'm adding the water everywhere where I have my yellows. Why I'm not going into the violets? Because if I go into the violets now, my paintbrush is going to get dirty and it's going to muddy up the yellows. So I'm careful not to muddy up the yellows here. Okay. You can also use acrylic paint to do the same thing. So instead of applying the pastel first and then washing it out, you're using paint slightly diluted with water to the consistency you need to actually apply the same way as we did now with the underpainting. Now I'm washing out my brush good, and we can start washing out those violets again from the lightest value. And here you can actually create those interesting patterns already in the underpainting. So as you see, I'm using my brush, I'm kind of punching against the paper. That way I'm creating a semblance of movement, and it appears as if there are already leaves happening there. But anyway, don't worry, our leaves won't be violet. We will be covering those up. But still, you will see how beautiful this violet is going to shine through once we start applying the greens on top. So still I'm going first through the lightest areas, and only then I'm going to go into the darker ones. Okay, now I can wash out my brush and wash out the darkest trunks. So this is the area that I want to come out to be the darkest one. Okay, that's one trunk. And this is the other one. So now what we need to do is we need to let this all dry. I'm gonna clean this up a bit. And we will work over this once it's dry. So we're back and ready to start applying the color. Here you have to make sure that it's completely dry, otherwise you risk of dragging the pastel into the wet areas and it's going to smudge a lot and it's going to create a mess. So make sure that your underpainting is completely dry before you start painting over it. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the paper. So I'm using pastel mat for this. You can also use the sandpaper that I mentioned in my previous tutorials, but do not use Sennelier Lacquard because that is also an abrasive surface, but because of its coating, it's going to come off as soon as you apply any liquid to it. So let's start adding colors. I'm going to start with my greens and we're going to work from the background towards the foreground. And I see that in my background, there is this kind of a dusty green there. So I'm going to start choosing colors for that. So I have this pale yellow, which I will be mixing in with my greens. So I'm adding this pale yellow for the background to show that that area is actually in the sunlight, but it's quite pale compared to the foreground. So that way we will bring the foreground closer to us. Also here there is a bit of that pale yellow. Then I'm going into my greens and I can start adding that green in the background there. And also around this tree. So you see that it's very muted, but at the same time it suggests that there's foliage there in the background. I actually want to add some dusty violets just to suggest some shadows on the background there, just so that we stay in the chosen colors, like so. And a bit here. So this is a kind of a dusty, paler violet. Okay, now that that's done, we need to move on into the branches over here. So here I see yellow greens and some browner greens. So the first thing I'm going to add that mid-tone value on my branches. And I'm letting that violet shine through. I'm going to go into a darker green. So I'm going into a browner. So this is a yellow green, but dark yellow green. And I'm going to move my pastel into in different ways just to create the semblance of leaves. So I'm adding that, and also on this side. Now we can move into a lighter color, and actually this is too dark, into a lighter color, and move some of those leaves in there that actually catch some light. Some of them will be shining through, and most importantly is that you move your pastel, you turn it around, and you don't add it in the same direction, all of them. Same way here, there are some brighter leaves I see here. So no need to draw each and every leaf, we're just adding masses now. Then I see that there are leaves here in my shadow area, so I'm going to start adding that little bush over here. Here there is a darker green. Actually, we can use a cooler green here. So this is a dark green, but it's closer to blues. Actually, too light. Yeah, this is gonna work just fine. So I'm adding a bit of that into the areas where I see the most, the darkest shadows. Now I'm gonna move onto my trunk and start adding the trunk with my browns, and I need to make sure that it's kind of a straight line, like so. I have different values of brown here. And when you are applying it with a very, very soft pressure, at the same time, you are creating the texture of the trunk. So here we can add even some lighter, the one that we were adding here in the background, something greenish. Like so. And here we can correct the shape with the same color. And here are those leaves. Okay. And just a bit of that light, just to take the tree out of the background and bring it to the foreground. So here we're creating that sharp edge. Okay, so here I want to liven up these leaves a bit. So I'm gonna add a bit of this brighter green. Just a very thin veil of this color to create the texture of the bark. Okay. Here I'm rubbing it in so that I can layer my leaves on top. And here I see that there are these leaves that come out in front of the tree. So I'm switching colors, darker and lighter greens. To create those leaves, like so. Then here in the background we need to start adding our greens as well. So here I'm just going to add a bit of this yellow green just to make these leaves pop. Like so. And then this grass green, we can cover all this area up for now, and then we will add some detail to it. So here I see that this shadow is not as dark. I'm adding this grass green for now, and we can gently blend the layer. And at the same time, look how beautifully the violets are shining through. Adding this over here as well. So gradually we're building on our violets, we're building the greens. So here I see that there is an area that catches light, so I'm using my lighter green. Once again, you don't need to use the same colors, absolutely. You can use colors that seem more pleasant to you. Here. Then let's add a bit of those darks. Let's add a bit of this dark green into the shadow of the tree to kind of merge it together color-wise. And with the brown, let's layer it over. Okay, so now we have a beautiful tree. Next, let's move on to this area. And here I see that there are those bushes there where they're closer to the ground. They will have darker shadow. And the same thing goes for this trunk. So I'm gonna layer it in. And I'm looking where I have the shadow side, so that's on the right, sorry. So I'm adding that. And I'm not going to make it as dark as this tree because I want it to stand slightly to kind of slide towards the background. Still gonna add this dark green into it, but not as intense as it was on this tree. And here I'm gonna add the lighter color. So this is my light brown. And I'm not adding this lightest color, this one here, the one that we added on the front tree, because I want that tree to kind of slide into the background. So here again, I'm looking at those greens and I see that they are quite dark here. So just locking in the shape of the bush. Here I have another tree, so I need to add it, but I'm not gonna even add any details to it, just make an indication that there is a tree there. Okay, then I'm gonna go into some lighter greens to create that transition into the lights, and here we have some lighter greens happening as well. And then over here we'd have those beautiful bright yellow greens. And we can even add our light yellow on top to indicate that area as if it's highlighted by the sun. Then over here we have those beautiful leaves that are very bright, very colorful, because they are letting the light shine through. I'm just moving in the direction of these leaves and covering this trunk also to kind of make it go backwards. And here I'm going to add those areas. So I'm looking at a patch of light that actually shines through these leaves and adding that. So I'm not drawing each and every leaf, I'm just drawing in the light that shines through the leaves. Here we can add a bit of darker areas and some darker green in places where there are shadows in between the leaves, like so. Here there are some leaves that go lower. Ooh, this one was too, so you need to make them as random as possible. Don't make them even in the same line like I did here. Here we can cover it up. Pastel mat is very easy to correct. Okay. And I want to add a bit more texture on this tree, and I'm gonna slide over with my dark green over here just to add more texture to it, to kind of bring it even more closer to us. And here I'm mixing these two values, the dark green and grassy mid-tone kind of value, to create the appearance of the bush deer. And actually I'm going to add a bit of this lighter color in here just to separate those branches from each other. Okay, so now you can see how it's coming along together. Here, if there's too much violet shining through, you can always layer it over it with this pale kind of cream color. And I want to add a bit of shadow to these leaves with this darker green. And then over the top I'm going to go with a grassier green, just to create more interesting texture. Okay, next we're moving towards this area here, and that's the path, and it's quite light. And here I'm going to add this cream color that we added on the background there, everywhere where there's this light. And I'm going to add this light yellow as well, just to warm it up a bit. Like so. Now we need to add the roots to our tree. Just an indication. Okay, and we can add just a bit of that dark green in that area that is more in the shadow. Okay, next we have the area of the path that is in the shadow, so we need something brown. And as it's mixing together with our violets, so here I still have the shadow of the bushes happening. Actually, this brown is quite intense. Yes, this paler brown, not as red. This is going to give us the appearance of the path being in the shadow and I'm adding it onto my path, and we will be mixing different colors here so it doesn't look so bland. So here's that light area. You can add some artistic license here and add, maybe there are leaves shining the more light through on this side. Then here we go again, adding the light to our path. Same way goes here. So everywhere where I see the light actually hitting the path, I'm adding this pale color. Okay. Gonna go into this greener pale color. I'm sorry that I'm not giving you the exact names of colors, because with pastels, as I've mentioned previously, it's very difficult to name each and every color. And actually what I want to add here is some red or brown. So I'm going to take this too tiny piece, this color that is kind of orangey, and I'm gonna add a veil of this color over my lightest areas. So just glazing it on top. Also in the darks, it's going to unite and marry those two colors that create the path better. Okay, now we need to go into our darks, so adding them where I already mapped out. So we mapped out the whole path, and now we're just adding lights and darks to the areas that we already mapped out up front, let's say. And this dark has to be dark enough for our lights to look bright. And here, what I want to do is I want to create those patches of light that the branches are actually letting through, and then in them there might be some smaller areas of shadow where the leaves are actually casting shadow, so they're not going to be of any precise shape. But if you look closely, you will see that the leaves are casting their shadows unevenly, let's say. Okay, so here I'm going to add a bit of this path. There's slightly. So this grass here is in the shadows, but still we see some grass there. And I'm going to layer this brighter green, so it seems as if this patch of grass that is in the sunlight is actually in front. Okay, next we have some grasses here, and I'm just gonna add more shadow over here. Okay, then we have some grass by this tree, and let's add brighter green here, because there is the area where the sunlight actually manages to get through the foliage, like so. And here we're going into the grass as well, but it's darker where the shadow is, and then it gets bright where it meets the path, like so. And I'm actually gonna lower this bright area slightly, so even though we have the underpainting reach until there, but I would like to move this path slightly, and also have a bit of a brighter patch here, so we create the contrast between the tree and that bright path. Okay, next what I want to do is I want to take my browns and want to add some darker areas to the path, and also some lighter areas. There are grasses growing on the path as well. And let's add also this area here. So this area is actually grass, so let's make it as dark as we can with this dark green that we used for the trunk, because it's closest to us. And also here there are some shadows on this bush. And the closest thing to us, if it's dark, is going to be the darkest. Then I'm adding grass green over the top here, again moving in these directions so that it's not the same, so it change my direction, the movement all the time. And then we're gonna add brighter colors on top to finally add those yellow greens. So here we have the yellow greens. We can actually make them slightly more detailed, so like so. And also here it's catching light. Let's use a slightly different variation of our yellow-green. Like so. And then I want to add some of this yellow-green onto the patch of grass here that actually catches sunlight. Some of this grass covers the trunk here. And now we can already go into detail. And what I want to do is actually I want to tone down a bit this area here of this path. I'm using the same color we were using for the trunk. I just want to tone it down a bit so that it's not as dark as the area, the one that's closest to us in the shadow. And I'm gonna blend it just slightly, like so, and add some lighter patches here where there might be light shining onto our path. So I'm adding those lightest areas of the path right now. Okay, and now I'm looking at my reference image and I want to lower this area just a bit of these bushes. So that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, and let's add those lighter colors here where the grass meets the tree, so we show that it's actually catching light. Okay, and then here I actually want to close this path slightly so that it doesn't lead us out of the drawing. Like so, and something lighter to go here, actually even lighter than this, just a light color to go here to indicate that there's depth to this whole thing. So I'm gonna outline this trunk here and create the illusion of depth behind the trunk, like so. Okay, and we have our drawing almost finished. The thing that I think that I want to add is some yellows to this tree in the background here. And something paler we can unify it with a harder pastel. It's going to blend the whole thing together. And actually I want to add some of those leaves to actually bring this branch slightly forward. So. And with a dark brown we can add those trunks of the bushes, but please don't add them in one line, because trunks, they have the tendency of somewhere you will see them more, somewhere they will hide behind the leaves. So we're doing that, we're adding very gently and breaking them up, and closer towards the bottom they will always become thicker. Okay, and I'm going to use a paler brown to indicate those trunks on the background there. Okay, that goes there, and let's add another one over here, and I'm blending it in. This way it's not as sharp, and it kind of takes it away towards the background. And if you think that you added too many trunks, just go back and with the color that we used for the background and cover it up. And there we go, our drawing is almost ready. I just want to add a bit more grass here. It goes into the shadow. And now you can see how beautiful it is when you have the violets actually shining through the greens, and how intense your greens look. So our tutorial is all over. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will have a beautiful forest painting in this technique that I showed you to hang on your wall or maybe gift to someone. And I just wanted to talk quickly about the big change coming to Patreon and to me actually opening the school. So it's going to be called mypastelschool.com, and there you will get new courses, membership subscription, so the same way that we did here on Patreon, but there I will be able to directly manage all the problems that are related to memberships. And maybe if you don't have access, because I've been asked previously about the access problem. So people were pledging more than $4, for example, and weren't getting the access to the $4 videos. But here I am actually working on this platform now. I'm doing it myself, so you have to bear with me, but it's going to be ready before the 8th of March. So I have the 8th of March as the launch date for my website. So now that I said it out loud, actually said it to you, I have to keep it. So I understood that I work with deadlines, I work a lot better. And yeah, it's still a work in progress, but soon I promise you will have the first glimpse of the website. It's going to be amazing. And you as my patrons are going to get the first discounts. I promise you that for the courses, because I'm working on a soft pastel course at the moment, and we're going to be doing completely from basics to color selection to actually how to apply pastels. So we will go through papers, pastel types, through all that stuff, and you're going to get the huge discounts. I promise that, because you stuck with me through the last year, and I'm so happy about that. And I hope that in future this is going to allow me to invest into better equipment. So the next big buy that I'm going to make is the setup with the widescreen and actually the lights. So this is the last time that you see shadows, hopefully, on the tutorial. And we will be doing more professional videos, and I hope that you will like them even more. And I'm also doing a course on pastels myself, so I will let you guys know how that goes, and I will definitely teach you new tricks and things that I've learned. So we'll be doing more interesting things. But in the meantime, I would so appreciate if you would let me know what exactly it is that you would like to see in a course for soft pastel basics. So if you have any particular questions, because I'm working on the script that I'm writing now for the course, and then I will be shooting it, but I need to know what is it that interests you mostly, and what topics you would like to look at in a course for pastel basics. So for now, this is it. I am so happy to actually be posting this video now, because I'm sorry that it's just coming out now in the middle of the month. It should have come out earlier, but Ellie got ill, and yeah, I was sitting home with her, so today's the first day she went to the nursery, yay! So, but otherwise, yeah, I'm back on track with the schedule and everything is great, and I will see you very soon in the next tutorial. For now, this is it. So do write in comments what you think. I would really love to hear from you guys. And yeah, bye!